everyone, welcome back to Glue La La. If you're new here, my name's Jess. Recently on Instagram, I asked everyone if they were still into Buffalo Plaid because I saw a really cool display at Hobby Lobby. And 69% of you said you still love it, and I do too. So today I have 3 Buffalo Plaid projects that are going to be perfect for your farmhouse fall decorating. Alright everyone, let's get started. For the first project, I wanted to paint a Buffalo Plaid pattern on this wooden pumpkin that I found at the Dollar Tree. So I started by removing the things from the front of the pumpkin, and then I filled in the holes with a little bit of spackling, just to kind of help camouflage them a little bit so you wouldn't see them through the paint job. So I'm going to try to explain this as quickly as I can because painting Buffalo Plaid is actually pretty easy, but I do have a more in-depth painting technique for Buffalo Plaid on a video I did around Christmas time, so I'll make sure that I link that in the description box below. So basically you want to start, you need 3 different shades of paint. So you need a light color, a dark color, and a medium color. Now if you don't have 3 shades, you could just use 2 colors, a light color and a dark color, and then mix them together to make the medium color. So you want to start by painting whatever piece you're doing with the lightest color first. Next you want to take either some painter's tape or some washi tape, and you want to create vertical stripes across your project. So I'm using some washi tape here, and you can see I'm just laying a piece down and then using a piece as a spacer to lay the second one down. And then once you have all the stripes going across your project vertically, you just want to paint in with the medium color. Once the vertical stripes are painted, you can remove the tape and then let it dry, and then you can move on to creating horizontal stripes. So I always like to start in the center of the project, whether I'm doing vertical or horizontal stripes, because I just think it looks better if the stripes are a little bit centered on the project. And it's the same thing for the horizontal. I laid a piece down, then used a piece as a spacer, and then continued on with my stripes. And then once all of that is in place, you're going to go ahead and paint the horizontal stripes in the same medium color that you used for the vertical stripes. Now once your horizontal stripes are painted, you don't want to peel the tape off. You want to leave that on. And I'm trying to show you here on the camera, but it's kind of hard to see. So you're going to go back through, and everywhere that you had the vertical tape placed originally, you're going to put that tape back over it. So in person you can see where the lighter squares are, and that's where you're going to place your tape. Everywhere that there's a lighter square from originally, whenever you put the vertical tape down, that's where you're going to put the tape back down again. So now you're going to have your original vertical stripes taped off, and you're going to have your horizontal stripes still taped off. And once you have all the tape in place for the vertical stripes, then you're going to go through with your darkest color and paint the whole project. And now that you have all the dark paint on, you can go ahead and remove all of the painter's tape off of your project to reveal your new Buffalo Plaid pattern. Now, I know I went through this pretty quickly, so like I said, I do have a slowed down version on a Christmas video, and I'll make sure that I link that below if you need a little bit more explanation. Next, I wanted to create a little banner that said fall to drape across the front of the pumpkin. So I'm taking some chipboard and I'm cutting it down to pieces that are 2.5 inches by 4 inches. And chipboard is basically the same material that cereal boxes are made out of. This chipboard is a little bit thicker than that, but you could definitely still use that, or you could even just use cardstock. If you're going to use cardstock, I would probably double it up though, just to make it a little bit thicker. Now the way that I like to create banner shapes, I take my ruler and I find the center of my piece. So in this case it was 1 1/4 inches, and I measured up about 1/2 inch, and I just put a little dot there. So then I cut straight up from the bottom to that center dot, and then I cut from each corner up to meet that center dot as well, and then that gave you that nice little banner shape across the bottom. Now the ruler that I'm using is a Holtz Ruler, and it actually has measurements that go in both directions, so it makes it really easy for this, but you could use a regular ruler too. Or if you're interested in the Holtz Ruler, I do have that linked in my description box below. Once I had all 4 of my banner shapes cut out, I just took a hole punch and I punched a hole in each corner of each of the banner shapes so that I had something to string it through. Then I mixed together some of the agave color and the plaster color by Waverly to create a lighter teal color, and I gave each of the banners 1 quick coat of paint. Then I decided to wrap the stem of the pumpkin with some jute twine. So I started on the back, which technically was the front of the old pumpkin, but I had covered that up with craft paper just to cover up that old design and to make sure that the glitter that was on it wasn't getting everywhere. And then I just took my time and I kind of wrapped the jute cord the whole way up to the top of the stem of the pumpkin. I decided to decorate the front of the pumpkin just a little bit more, so I'm using some random pieces of greenery that I have left over from some old floral stems, and then I'm actually going to repurpose that metal leaf that came on the front of the pumpkin originally, and I just glued them all to the top of the stem, and then I added a little jute bow to finish everything off. I used my Cricut to cut out the letters for the word fall, but you could always use letter stickers from the Dollar Tree or Michael's, or if you're good at hand lettering, you could always do that too. But if you do have a Cricut, this is the font that I used for these letters. So I took some jute twine, and this one is a little bit thinner than the stuff that I used for the top of the stem, and I just strung it through the letters on the word. So I always start on the right hand side and I go down through the first hole, and then I come up through the hole on the left hand side, and then I just left a tiny little bit of a gap between each letter. Now if you're not using the same wooden pumpkin that I did, you might have to adjust the size a little bit on your banners to make sure that they fit across the front of whatever project you're doing, but this was a good size for across the front of this pumpkin that I did. To finish everything off on my pumpkin, I took some black clothespins that I already had in my stash, and I just hot glued them to each corner of my pumpkin so that I had something to clip my banner into. And here's a look at how this pumpkin turned out. The second project comes together really quickly, and instead of painting the buffalo plaid, I'm going to use this buffalo plaid fabric that I found at Walmart. And I'm also using one of these thin canvases from the Dollar Tree that measures 11 by 14. I started by cutting a piece of the fabric that was about 1.5 inches larger than the canvas itself, and then in each corner I just kind of removed a little bit of that excess fabric before I started hot gluing the flaps down. So you can see here I kind of mitered these corners because it really helps take the bulk out whenever you're folding a piece over like this. And then I just ran a little bit of hot glue down around the edge of each side of the canvas, and I pulled the fabric fairly tight. Now the reason I did that instead of gluing on the front side of the canvas is because I was afraid the hot glue would kind of show through a little bit, like it might look a little bit bumpy. So when I got to the opposing sides, then I just tucked in a little bit of the excess fabric, and then I did the same thing. I ran a little bit of hot glue along the top, and then I pulled the fabric fairly tight down the whole side of the canvas. I decided to add some cardstock on the back of my piece just to cover up the raw edges of that fabric, but that's optional. You don't have to do that. I found this really cool pumpkin dish at the Dollar Tree. So I decided that would look really cool as a centerpiece on this canvas, so I mixed together the plaster color and the agave color again, and I did have to give this dish 2 coats of that paint mixture. Next I took this mineral color by Waverly, and I decided to paint just the stem of the pumpkin with that color. I wanted the stem to be a different color, but I didn't want it to be too dark. I wanted it to blend in just a little bit more, so that's why I thought this mineral color would look really good on this pumpkin. Then once I had the stem painted, I decided I wanted the lines in the pumpkin to stand out just a little bit more. So I actually mixed together some of that teal color with the mineral color just to make it a little bit of a different shade, and then I ran that along the lines of the pumpkin as well. For the center of the pumpkin, I'm using a pack of these metal words that you can find at the Dollar Tree. They usually bring these out for every holiday, and for the fall season, they have this pack that says thankful, welcome, and harvest. So I decided to use the word harvest, and I gave it 2 coats of the elephant color by Waverly. I knew I needed to put something on the inside of this dish so that I could attach it to the canvas. So I'm using the tumbling tower blocks and I'm gluing 2 together and then gluing those into the inside of the pumpkin. I did 4 little groups of 2 all together, and that was plenty to be able to attach this pumpkin to the canvas. So once I had all of those tumbling tower blocks in place inside the pumpkin dish, then I just ran a little bit of hot glue on the blocks themselves to attach it to the canvas. I also used a little bit of hot glue in the center of the word harvest, and then I just hot glued that to my pumpkin. To finish off this sign, I decided to create a little bit of a border at the top and the bottom just by wrapping some jute twine several times around the frame itself. And here's a look at how this piece turned out. So for the last project, I wanted to create a little bit of a stand that could actually be used year-round. Now, I had seen some other YouTubers take these metal cake pans and cookie sheets and stuff from the Dollar Tree, and they let them sit in toilet bowl cleaner, of all things, to give them a rusty kind of distressed look. So I decided to try that out because I had never done that before. I let the pan sit in the toilet bowl cleaner for a full day, and this is how it turned out. I didn't love it, but I didn't really hate it either, but I knew I could like it better if I just gave it a little bit of distressing with some of the plaster color by Waverly. So I just did a little bit of dry brushing around the whole pan, and I liked the color a lot better. I like that you could still see that kind of yellowy rust color coming through, but I like that the white kind of muted it down just a little bit. To create this stand, I am using some of this super glue fix-all adhesive from the Dollar Tree, which is pretty comparable to E6000, and I just added a couple dots to the top of this candle stand from the Dollar Tree, and then I added a couple dots of hot glue as well, and I glued it onto the bottom. Now, I haven't had any issues with this. I like how this adhesive worked. I think it's pretty close to the E6000, and it's only $1. I knew I wanted this candle stand to kind of look like it had a beaded garland wrapped around the edge of it. So I'm using some of this leftover fabric from the last project, and I'm cutting it into strips with my pinking shears. The strips I cut were about 4 inches long and about 1 inch wide. Now, if you don't have pinking shears or you don't like that look, you could just cut these regularly, or you could even tear the fabric if you wanted it to have a really kind of frayed, distressed look to it too. And if you don't have fabric at all, you can just find some Buffalo Plaid ribbon and use strips of ribbon instead. To assemble my beaded garland, I'm using 2 different sizes of wooden beads. Now, I get these beads from Amazon, and I always have those linked in the description box below. I also pre-cut some jute twine strips because I knew I would need those whenever it came to the fabric part. So I started by stringing on one of the smaller beads, one of the larger beads, and then another smaller bead. Then I took a piece of the strip of fabric that I had already cut, and I kind of folded it over the jute twine. And then I took one of the jute twine strips that I had cut, and I tied it as close as I could to the top of the fabric where it looped over the jute. And then I just tied it in a double knot, and I left a little bit of a tail because I kind of like that look on this garland. Then I repeated that process until I had a garland that was long enough to wrap around the top of the tray. Now, if you wanted a little bit of a different look for this garland, instead of looping the fabric over and then tying the jute twine around it, you could always just actually tie the fabric right onto the garland itself. But I wanted it to kind of look like it had a little tassel hanging down, so that's why I decided to tie mine on this way instead of actually just tying the fabric onto the garland. To attach the garland to the tray itself, I flipped the tray upside down because it was just a little bit easier to work that way. And I found the center of my garland, and since I was using 2 different size beads, everywhere that there was a larger bead, I just added a little dot of hot glue to the tray, and then I was able to push the bead into that hot glue to secure it. That way it kind of kept it a little bit tight around the top of the tray, and it kind of held it in place just a little bit more. So once I had all of the larger beads glued into place on the tray, then I just had to tie the two ends together to finish off the garland. And here's a look how this tray turned out. Here's a final look at all the projects today. I think my favorite is probably the pumpkin sign I did at the beginning because I love painting buffalo plaid. You'll have to let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. Also, let me know if you call it buffalo plaid or buffalo check, because I've heard it called both things and I know they both mean the same thing, but I always just say buffalo plaid. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you hit subscribe, ring the bell, hit thumbs up, do all the things. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye!